kind of increase, unfortunately, means that the government can't even maintain the status quo. And we all know that this is the #1 issue in the minds of Nova Scotians. It tends to dominate this legislature, tends to dominate question period. Things are not only not going to get better in healthcare as a result of this budget, they are going to get worse. Now, Mr. Speaker, we all know that the rate of increase in healthcare spending cannot continue to go up. The healthcare budget cannot continue to grow by 8% every year without something giving. But what we need, what we're looking for, is a plan. We're looking for a direction, a vision, especially from a party and a government that came into office in the 1999 election largely because of their criticism of the Liberal government's failure to have a vision for healthcare. Mr. Speaker, after reading this budget, we are none the wiser about how the government is going to rein in healthcare costs. We are none the wiser about what the future holds. We are none the wiser, Mr. Speaker, about how the government is going to deliver the services that Nova Scotians need in the healthcare system. And Mr. Speaker, I talked earlier about the pharmacare program that is not being delivered this year. Well, let me mention another one that I heard one of the ministers on the other side mention, the colorectal screening program. That's a good thing, Mr. Speaker, but the government is not implementing a colorectal screening program this year. They are implementing the development work, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be consultants. It's going to be consultants and equipment that get this year's money. Not one more person is going to be screened for colorectal cancer this year as a result of this budget. Just like not one single Nova Scotia family is going to get pharmacare coverage this year, Mr. Speaker. But that is not the impression that the government wants to leave with Nova Scotians. Those of us who have been in the House for any length of time, Mr. Speaker, are aware of the painful and persistent gap between what the government wants people to believe is happening and what is actually happening. We have to find ways of closing that gap and eliminating that gap, and the pharmacare program, the colorectal screening program, are only a couple of examples where the government claims to be doing one thing, but is not doing that thing, or is doing it in such a small way that for all practical purposes, they're really doing nothing, Mr. Speaker. This is, at the end of the day, the budget of a government that is still trying to figure out what it is all about. It is still directionless. What we see are slogans instead of substance, and the government rolled out a whole new slogan yesterday, which was repeated in today's budget. Mr. Speaker, we'll see how long they go with it till they abandon it for another slogan. We don't want slogans. We want substance. When will this government learn that the most powerful, persuasive, long-lasting, attractive political tool ever invented is the truth? To tell Nova Scotians the truth about what is happening, to say, no, sorry, we can't deliver the pharmacare program this year, instead of claiming they are, but it turns out it's really just for computer work. Mr. Speaker, we need a government that drops the slogans in favor of substance. We need a government that shows its firm commitments instead of ever-shifting enthusiasms. On this side of the House, in this party, our commitment is clear. We are for a better deal for today's families. We have shown that, Mr. Speaker. We will work with the government as long as they show us, as long as they show Nova Scotians that they are headed in that direction, or even show that they might be headed in that direction, or give us hope that they may be headed in that direction, Mr. Speaker. That is a standard by which we will judge this government. That's the standard by which we will judge this budget, Mr. Speaker. And if the government is not prepared to do that, if the government is not prepared to show that they understand what it means to deliver a better deal for today's families, then all we can do, Mr. Speaker, is to take it to the people of Nova Scotia and let them decide. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise today to speak to the budget and reply to the budget this year. On behalf of my caucus, I would also like to send our best wishes to the Minister of Finance. I know he's certainly worked very hard to bring in this budget under difficult personal and difficult political situations. So I would like to extend our support to him personally. Like all members of the House, I know that it is in our best interest to look to the concerns of Nova Scotians and to represent them here as we deliberate a budget that has an impact on the people of Nova Scotia. So our concern as members of the Liberal caucus is that we look at this budget with care and consider the details so that we can see that there is benefit for our constituents and for the people who make Nova Scotia their home, which is so important. This budget does include a great deal of increased spending. We're talking about $440 million increase in revenue. That is a little bit unusual in our province and perhaps more unusual in light of the cautions that we were receiving from the government side of the House in the lead up to this budget. I guess we should be prepared to know that sometimes they pull a rabbit out of the hat or mislead us along the way. However, we are glad to see that you were still able in this budget to meet certain priorities that the Liberal caucus has and priorities of the people of Nova Scotia. The budget includes a large increase again for health care, Mr. Speaker, and we're looking at once again 7%. Over the last few years that I've been here and been the finance critic, we've seen even double-digit increases in health care spending, and this year it is approaching $3 billion. And I feel that it's important as members of the House to caution the government about the increases in spending because there must be a better way to approach this particular department. We know that this government in 1999 felt they could solve the whole problem for less than $100 million and rode that wave to victory in 1999 saying that they had a plan, but we have yet to see your plan in health care. And we would like to know why it's up $1.5 billion. I'm very kind. Yes, yeah, it's continued to rise. As I say, this is a bottomless pit, and all of us are concerned about people who need help, and there are ways and programs that are needed, but the concern is that this will swamp and overtake all other government spending, and in fact, the previous Premier had said so by the year 2020. We would have overtaken all other department spending. So this, again, seeing a 7% increase and no plan on how we're going to curtail that is a concern to the Liberal caucus. At the same time, we see an increase in post-secondary education of over 10%, just barely over 10%. And I think all members of the House and certainly our caucus agree that post-secondary education, investing in our students, in our apprenticeship, in our skills training, and the community college is extremely important for our future. That's one area of expenditure where I know that we see a benefit, and it addresses some of our key concerns in terms of demographics and the trends in our province. We need to help our young people stay here to study, get the skills they need, and find employment in our province if we are to continue to grow and sustain. So I think those major trends are a bit of a concern on the health side. We are interested in greater spending on education, and we know that we need to give more support to our students. So in framing that, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the issue that's been underlying the budget this year, and as we know, causing a great deal of uncertainty, has been the battle around equalization and exactly how the equalization formula was going to work and help us here in this province. And we've seen really that the federal government have sold us out and have backed away from their promises and their commitments. And I mentioned specifically their election commitments in January a year ago when they promised to abide by the accord that was in place and that they promised they would respect it. And Mr. Speaker, we have seen that they have turned their backs on Nova Scotia and in fact turned their backs on our government here. Mr. Speaker, this has had a profound effect both in planning and executing this year's budget and in making a decision that's going to have a tremendous effect on our future. It really is a question of us having to gamble, Mr. Speaker, on the future of our
Order, please.
offshore accord.
Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking about the offshore accord and the gamble that the government has been forced into taking. Today we were able to see the projected revenues that would come under both scenarios. The government having been given a choice between keeping the old equalization or older formula and being able to maintain our offshore accord, or switching to this new program that's been proposed by the federal government. By doing so, by choosing the new approach, which is I guess, determined by an O'Brien report, it means that we actually get a lot more money this year and in future years. And that has to be measured very carefully, Mr. Speaker, against the model where if we stick or hold fast to our commitment to the accord, we certainly won't be in as good a position over time. And in fact, the 5-year projection, which I was just seeking out here, is almost $1 billion difference. We're looking at $921 million difference in a 5-year period of time. When you compare the two, it shows that the government scarcely had a choice in terms of what to do. Because, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is not a province that has the fiscal capacity to manage that kind of a hit financially. We have a population of less than 1 million people, but we are spread around many communities, and we have a need for services. You know, we know that we're a province whose roads are in desperate shape, in some areas worse than desperate, and we're a province that has a need to provide health care and education to our rural and smaller communities, as well as in our capital. So these create fiscal pressures that have to be addressed. And for a small province like Nova Scotia to forego almost $1 billion in extra revenue over just 5 years is simply too much for us to absorb. So I feel that the government, the federal government, has abandoned Nova Scotia and has also put us in a very untenable situation. The success I think we just call it the success that former Premier Ham had in negotiating that accord was also a success, I believe, for the federal Liberal Party who supported it and came to the aid of Nova Scotia. And to see that just torn up and thrown aside is thank you. You know, I certainly feel that it is wrong, and that we've been misled, and the government has lied to us in their attempt to win seats in this province. And I do call upon the government to, can't say lie.
Order,
misled.
please. I would ask the honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park just to withdraw that word and continue with her address.
Withdraw that word. I'd like to say that we were misled. All of us were misled in the election aspirations of the federal Conservatives. And I do believe that our sitting Conservative federal members should speak up and speak up loudly, and all Atlantic members should be talking from one song sheet, singing from one song sheet. And in fact, our caucus has offered the Premier that we would like to join in an all-party committee to raise this issue with the federal government, because I believe when we join our voices together, it is a stronger, one voice is stronger than 3 parties speaking separately. And I'm sure that the official opposition would want to be part of that, because we all have a great deal at stake in this situation of being asked to forego what could be our opportunity through the accord to become a province that can benefit directly from our offshore and the revenues that are coming in, and not to be held hostage to be penalized because we have an industry that's expanding or that we hope will expand. We know there's a lot of uncertainty around that, and that's what makes the decision so difficult. If we were able to predict precisely what the value is of our offshore, that would be one thing. But as you know, there's a great deal of uncertainty. It makes it a tremendous gamble for our province, Mr. Speaker, and that concerns us greatly. Mr. Speaker, one of the issues that is always hanging over the head of our province is our tremendous debt. And we carry a debt of $12.4 billion. And we should not forget, I should mention in the budget address, it was mentioned that the debt was accumulated through the 80s and maybe the early 90s, but it was not mentioned that half of our tremendous $12.4 billion debt was accumulated during the years that John Buchanan was our premier. And I think it has to be repeated because that was a time of...
She just mentioned who started it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you guys
Order, please. Order. Order, please. The House has accorded courtesy to all speakers here this afternoon. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park has the floor.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, that is just part of the history lesson. It's part of the record. We know the spending was out of control and reckless for many years during that particular administration. And I think it's worthwhile noting that we must never go there again, that the fact that this year's budget is balanced and has been for a couple of years, number of years, that's a good thing. That's something that the Liberal caucus and Liberal Party believes must be the way to go. And we know that there's a great danger in carrying a debt that's so high. Mr. Speaker, we have been very fortunate to be in a period of time when the interest rates are at historically low levels. And that has been, you know, a mechanism and a means for the government to manage the debt and to bring down the amount of our debt servicing costs. We're going in the right direction with that, having brought it down to 12.1% of our provincial expenditures. But bearing in mind that this is still over $800 million a year going out in debt servicing costs. That would pay for a lot of daycare spaces. It would help women's centers. It would help alleviate poverty in this province. And there are so many things that we have in terms of social needs that are pressing in our province. And they're not being addressed partly because we're carrying this onerous and difficult debt. This year, the Premier has indicated his concern for the debt. It's the first time we have heard him speak about that, and we're hoping that his commitment is sincere and will be realized in future budgets and a continued effort to bring our debt under control, because it does require more than a balanced budget. It requires a plan and a sticking with that debt reduction plan. Mr. Speaker, we would like to see that plan certainly strengthened if at all possible, because the debt has, as I say, has prevented us from really helping people who need it the most. What has helped us in this province as well has been an increase in our own source revenues, Mr. Speaker, and the government has enjoyed really 7 years of growth in our own economy, which has been very fortunate and allowed them to introduce some programs and some spending which was not possible in 1999. The 1999 budget that was defeated and triggered an election was about a $5 billion budget. And this year in program spending and debt servicing, we see the budget well over $7 billion. So that's a tremendous increase in spending power and capability for the province. A lot of it has come from our own source revenues. The percentage that we're receiving now from equalization is less than it was in 1999 on a percentage basis. Still very significant on a dollar basis, as we have said, but it is going down because our own economy has grown, our level of employment has grown, our own businesses are expanding, and therefore we're in a stronger position to fund some of the things that we need. One of the most significant increases this year is in the offshore royalties. And in just 3 years, the income we've received from the offshore industry and from our royalties has gone from $128 million to $280 to $420 million. And that is a tremendous increase and a very significant proportion of our budget. That has in fact saved us this year and allowed us to help to spend for students and to spend on important programs where the demand has been significant. But my concern with the offshore royalty is that, again, as I said earlier, we can't predict how long it will last, where it's going, what reserves we have, and how long we can enjoy this kind of an increase. Mr. Speaker, even if the amount were sustainable, even if it just remains stable from year to year, that would be wonderful. But we know it's going to peak and it's going to begin to decline at some point in time, and that is a concern to us. We're watching with great interest as the Deep Panuke project comes forward. Cautiously optimistic, Mr. Speaker, because again, we're not sure how this is going to be, and we're concerned about not being misled that there's more there or that it will be longer lasting than perhaps it will. In terms of the Sable project, we are 3 or 4 years behind what was expected initially. So we have to be cautious in trying to measure and anticipate where that industry is going to be in a few years. In terms of the offshore industry, Mr. Speaker, I believe that it's important that we invest more in the human resources and support for the industry on the regulatory side so that there will be an interest among the industry to come here and explore. In just the last couple of years, we've seen exploration licenses being expired, and we've actually gained some financial benefit, which is not where we want to gain financial benefit from seeing an industry that's cashing in and not bothering to go forward with exploration. So I do urge the government to look carefully about how we can create the right environment to continue that level of exploration and interest in the offshore.
Order, please. I would just ask the members to mind the noise level in the chamber. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are two significant priorities really in Nova Scotia, or challenges in Nova Scotia. One of them is our labour growth, and the other is our decline in population. And wherever you travel in the province, and I know the members can attest to this from their own communities, this is a major concern for the people living in big and small communities in Nova Scotia. Overall, our population has declined in 14 of the 18 census areas in Nova Scotia. And some of those declines have been significant in the double digits. I believe Guysborough was 17% decrease in population. Rural Nova Scotia is particularly hard hit, Mr. Speaker. And in this budget, we see several things that I believe will help in rural Nova Scotia in terms of population. One of them is the expansion of the student employment program, which is an initiative that the Liberal government has been calling for or Liberal caucus has been calling for, soon to be Liberal government has been calling for a long time. Yeah. That's it. Yep. The student employment program, Mr. Speaker, allows young people to return to their own homes and have jobs in the summertime. And without that, there are many nonprofit groups and smaller employers that don't have access to students because they don't have the help to hire them in the summer months. So having an additional 225 jobs created for young people is very significant and will make a big difference in our small areas and in our tourist industries, our little museums and tourist businesses. So I applaud the idea that we have expanded the student employment program. And along the same veins, Mr. Speaker, is the introduction of the Winter Works program. I should say it's a reintroduction, Mr. Speaker, because that was a Liberal program that was axed a number of years ago by the Conservatives. But again, you have seen that it is an important program. I know that the government is listening to the people of Nova Scotia in all communities and sees the need to help supplement so many of our people who live on seasonal income and seasonal work. And providing a Winter Works program allows them, again, to stay in their own communities rather than leaving to find work during the part of year when their seasonal jobs are not available. So this is another very important program which is going to provide, I believe, in the range of 300 jobs in the winter months, particularly to help rural Nova Scotia. And those two programs together are very important. Another one, Mr. Speaker, that I believe will make a big difference is the expansion of the payroll rebate program. This program will have a bigger impact in rural Nova Scotia, again, where the jobs are more scarce. What we're seeing in this program is that now you will be eligible for the payroll rebate if you create 25 new jobs rather than the former threshold of 50 new jobs. And I know that the demand has been there in smaller employers, and I still consider 25 new jobs a pretty big employer. But nevertheless, it's making this program open and available to more businesses in Nova Scotia. So for that, we are very pleased to see that go forward, and I hope it will have a direct and immediate impact on some businesses. Mr. Speaker, in the healthcare area, particularly for seniors, there are a couple of things that I think are good news and worth noting. One of them is the pilot program introduced for in-home support, which will help caregivers looking after their own loved ones in their own homes. Mr. Speaker, we've seen time and time again where people have come to us because the stresses are so great to care for your own loved ones where they should be with their families. And often the stress becomes too great financially or because of the cost of renovating or adapting homes. There's so many financial stresses on the family that often the only option is a nursing home or looking for long-term care. And at present, we have 1,600 people waiting for a long-term care bed, so that option is not immediately available for families that are under stress either. So turning the government's attention towards the need for support for home care and caregivers, family caregivers, is a very big plus in my opinion and in the opinion of this caucus. We also applaud the idea of putting more funds into the Department of Seniors. Last year, the budget did no more than create the department in name and reassign the secretariat, the senior secretariat, to that. You did name a minister for seniors, and we're pleased with that, but it was just the very first small steps. This year, it is good to see some funds being put in there, additional funds of $800,000, which brings the office or the Department of Seniors up to a $2 million level of spending. That's a positive step for this province. We have, as Mr. Speaker, as you know, 160,000 seniors living in Nova Scotia, and they require a voice, and they also require, I think, very concerted, focused programs that will help government respond to their needs and create a better environment for our seniors as they age. And as you know, the initiative these days is to help people age in place. In other words, age where they live in their community, still contributing and maintaining their social and other networks that are in place after years of living in a community. I also applaud the addition of the target for accessible buildings, that we will have our public buildings moving towards full accessibility by the year 2020. And I think the government is wise in choosing a date and locking into that and making a firm commitment to the people of Nova Scotia who have been asking. I know the group, the League for Equal Opportunities, and others have been asking that we respond to the needs of the disabled. And I believe in the budget address it was mentioned that we have a high proportion of people who receive disability in this province. So, Mr. Speaker, I think there are a number of very positive things that we've referred to. How's my time? I wanted to go to the subject of gas regulation, Mr. Speaker, because that is an area where we have differed with the government, and we differ strongly with the official opposition as well. Mr. Speaker, gas regulations mean higher prices in Nova Scotia for consumers. Whenever we go to the pumps and fill up, we're paying 11 cents more right now than our neighbors in New Brunswick. And today might have been a day when there was an adjustment, but there was no adjustment. We're still paying the same amount as we did last week.
And who benefits from that?
Regulation was looked at in a study that the government had requested. It cost over $170,000 for that study. And the study recommended that we not go to gas regulation. Right. As a pre-election move, the government of the day, our government that's here today, in fact, adopted this move with encouragement from the official opposition, and that has cost Nova Scotian consumers. And that also costs our business, Mr. Speaker, because every business that has to transport goods or move items or people has to pay more, and that hurts all of us. So the regulated system, we believe, is flawed. We believe the first year or 6 months of its operation has shown that it was the wrong move to make, and that we should not be having this kind of a price difference between ourselves and our neighboring province of New Brunswick, regardless of the tax differences, because we know that taxes are lower in New Brunswick, but even at that, the 11 cents far outstrips the tax difference. We look to see the answer soon, I guess, with the review which is underway on gas price regulations.
April 1st, no delays, right, Jamie?
We hope to see greater moves on conservation. I note that more money has been put in to conserve Nova Scotia, but we want to see some programs in place that are going to have immediate effects on helping Nova Scotians change their behavior. I will mention only briefly that there is the opportunity to pass a bill on credits for transit users on their bus passes and for fuel-efficient vehicle purchases. 4 other provinces have already moved to provide, 3 other provinces have provided tax incentives for consumers to purchase fuel-efficient vehicles. That would be Ontario, Manitoba, and our neighbor Prince Edward Island. And the federal government has made a move in that direction in their recent budget. So maybe the time is right for this province to look at that as a way of showing that we're serious about changing our habits and our consumption of energy. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to touch students for a little bit before I close, because the student lobby has been very loud and strong and have presented their case very well to all members of this House. Student leaders have pointed out not only do we have the highest tuition in the country by $2,000, but we also have been awarded the dubious distinction of being the least affordable jurisdiction in which to study. We were rated, I believe, 60th out of 60 jurisdictions, including the United States as well as Canadian provinces, and that included the cost of living as well as the cost of studying in those jurisdictions. And so the need to address and respond to our students in this province is acute. As I mentioned earlier, the education system is very important to us. Trying to attract and maintain the student body here in the province is a key for us for our future growth. Many of the students who choose to move here from other provinces to study will choose to stay because they like it here, they enjoy our lifestyle, they enjoy our province. But we need to attract them here in the first place, and we're hitting a point where we're absolutely uncompetitive with our neighbors across the country, not only our immediate neighbors, but right across the country. So it's important to do more to help them. I note that for our own students, we've lowered tuition by about $500 in the coming year. I hope that that program is sustainable, Mr. Speaker, because we know that there was a 2-year program which was federal government monies that were diverted here from last year's surplus, and that was only to go for 2 years. And the $440 tuition relief was given this year to students in Nova Scotia. I assume this $500 is added to that, but I am concerned, Mr. Speaker, about the future of that program and hoping that it is sustainable so that we will be able to find ourselves at a level that is at least on the national average within a couple of years. And I think that we have to get there as soon as possible. The tax incentive for students that graduate and choose to stay and work in Nova Scotia is something that was included in the Liberal platform in the last election, not 1 year ago. We proposed it over a number of years, but we are happy to see the government increase it from a one-time amount of $1,000 to now a $2,000 benefit for students who will stay and work here in Nova Scotia. And I note that that's not a tax credit. It's actually a tax incentive which would come right off the bottom line of the taxes paid. So we do appreciate that and believe that that is the right thing to do, and perhaps could increase it as well. Hurry it up. Thank you. Will do. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of Liberal initiatives in this budget which we do appreciate and are glad to see. We believe they make sense. One of them was the firefighters credit, offering up to $500 credit for volunteer firefighters. I know it's going to be phased in over a few years, or a number of years. We also see user fees being changed so that they will now come and be reported before the House. And we have introduced a private member's bill to that effect earlier this year, and believe that that is the right way to shine the spotlight and have proper accountability on the user fees. The change in the primary age for starting school, moving it from October 1st towards December 31st and making us more competitive, is also a move that we believe is the right thing to do and have introduced measures to that effect. And we support the idea of helping and providing direct support to the pork producers in Nova Scotia, because that industry has been under tremendous stress and requires assistance so that the people engaged in that industry can make the move towards a more sustainable production of pork. Mr. Speaker, just on the taxes, I wanted to mention two things. I believe that we need to move, again, we are moving by baby steps with the $250 a year on the basic personal exemption limit, but we are still way out of line with the rest of the country in terms of where we stand. Nova Scotia will move up a little bit to about the mid 7,500 or so, but Alberta offers 14,000. And the next closest is Quebec at 9,000. So I'd like to see us move up, because that's money most beneficial to our working poor, people that are on the bottom line of that. So those are important measures. I know that the Canadian Federation of Business was looking for a move to stop the bracket creep or the indexation of our brackets, that they are at present not connected to the federal brackets, and we'd like to see that as well. Mr. Speaker, We urge the government to work with all parties on the issue of equalization and the fight to see our offshore accord respected in the federal government. We urge you to look at an all-party approach to that because we believe that together our voices will be stronger. I thank my colleagues for your attention today, and with that I will adjourn debate. Thank you.
The estimates are referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Supply. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would move that the House now adjourn to meet on Monday at the hour of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The House hours would be from 2 to 10 o'clock on Monday. The order of business after the daily routine would be the Committee of the Whole House on Supply and public bills for second reading.
The motion is for the House now rise and meet Monday at the hour 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried.